Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Apyayantu Mamangani Vak Pranashchakshushrotramatho Balamindriyani cha Sarvani Sarvam Brahmopanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam Ma Brahma Nirakarot Anirakaranamastu Anirakaranam Me Astu Tadatmani Nirateya Upanishatsu Dharmaha Te Mai Santo Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so let us just read what we did last week. We'll just review and then we'll move forward today. So last week we were on the last chapter of Kenopanishad, chapter 4, and we really focused on the upasanas. So why were we here again? We were here because even though the knowledge of Brahman was given, even though students come and all of them listen to the knowledge and the teacher gives the same knowledge to the students, some students are not able to get the knowledge. And why aren't they able to get the knowledge? Because the mind isn't prepared. It's not prepared. So it's as though it comes and then it goes. And so to get that mind rooted and to purify it so that the knowledge stays with them, these upasanas are given. So these upasanas are a method either to be practiced in the beginning before one even comes to knowledge, or also to be practiced at the even during or at the end, to get one's mind really focused and single pointed so that they can contemplate on this formless and nameless Brahman. So here now we will start here reviewing from verse 4. In verse 4, chapter 4.4, there are two upasanas given, and one was vidyutaha. So yad etad vidyutaha Vyadyutada iti nyamimishada ityadidaivatam. So here, what was given was lightning and the blinking of the eyes. And we saw lightning, so many aspects. We can find similarities with lightning and Brahman, although Brahman has no comparison, but that lightning as though reminds us that knowledge comes and it goes in a flash to some people, and to those whose minds are prepared, it comes, it illumines everything, and it stays. We also saw that it's like the blinking of the eye because it's so effortless. Brahman is effortlessly present, and only because of the presence of consciousness, creation and destruction of the world can take place. So when we open our eyes, there's the creation of the world. And when we close our eyes, there's destruction. But all of this takes place in the substratum, which is Brahman. Then we saw in verse 5, Athadhyatmam. So the first two upasanas were Adidevata, means they were macrocosmic upasanas. This is microcosmic, or this comes to this comes closer to ourselves. Adhyatma. Adhi, when you see the prefix adhi, it usually means pertaining to. So pertaining to Adi Devata means pertaining to the cosmos. Adhi Atma means pertaining to the self. And here we use the mind as a support. And the idea is to follow the mind and gacchati iva manaha. Gacchati iva cha manaha. That mind, it as though goes, because when it comes to a certain point, it cannot go anymore. When the mind, when we trace the root of the mind, the source of the mind, it cannot move anymore. It just dissolves. So gacchati iva, as though goes, it cannot go anymore. It just dissolves in consciousness itself. That's what that means. And anena chaitat upasmarati. Also, by this mind, we remember the knowledge. We use this mind to remember. Abhikshanam sankalpaha. And also, we, in the midst of all the sankalpas, all the willingness of the mind, off and on it comes, we pay attention to the silent moments, the silent pauses of the mind, and try to hold that. So here we're using the mind as a support. So in the first two, we use lightning as a support. We use blinking as a support. Here we use the mind as a support. Then in verse number 6, 4.6, Tadha Tadvanam Nama. Here now the upasana is different. It's called Tadvanam. Vanam here means the most adorable. Tadvanam iti upasitavyam. So worship that which is adorable to all. Saya etad eva Veda. The one who knows it in this way. Actually, this abhi should go with samvanchati. So, saya etad evam Veda, the one who knows this in this way, he enagam sarvani bhutani abhisamvanchati, means all the beings worship them. So, a little bit more about this tadvanam. So, tadvanam is the most worshipful thing, but when we really think of what is the most worshipful thing, the most worshipful thing is the self. Right? The most adorable, the most worshipful, the most loved thing is the self. We saw this in Vivekachudamani. We saw this also in Panchadashi. Who do we love and adore and worship the most? It's ourselves, right? It's not somebody else. We love someone, appear to love someone only because they give us joy. So what that really means is we love something or someone because you give me joy. So it really means that I like myself. I love myself because the minute you give me sorrow, I don't want you anymore. So more than I love you, more than we love others, we really love ourselves. So the most adorable is the self. And another way of looking at Tadvanam is just seeing that adorable self in everything. So whether it's there are these poets and the singers, and they write and they say the feet of God are like this earth, and the mountains are like the steadfastness of God. The air is like the breath and breeze of God. The leaves and the trees are like the hair of God. So they, in everything, they see God. The chirping of the birds, that's the sound of God. So everything they see, that adorable self, that adorable God or the adorable self, whichever, they see in every beautiful thing, there is the self behind it. There is God behind it. There is that worshipful, adorable awareness behind it. And this is called Tadvana. And someone who practices seeing this beauty everywhere, everybody in turn worships them. Why? Because we saw last time, whatever we worship, those qualities come to us. So if we worship the most worshipful one, then we also become that worshipful one. And that's the fruit of upasana. So tadvanam is that seeing the beauty in everything, in everybody. It's the upasana of love. It's that quality of love and being so open and so available and welcoming that everybody comes. And beauty is seen in everything, even in gross destruction. Beauty is even seen in that, as we can see in chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita. So this marks these upasanas, these supports to contemplate on, so that we can slowly focus our mind on the self. Now, after these upasanas were given, so this Upanishad works this way, the knowledge of the self was given in chapter 1 and 2. Then in chapter 3, what was given is the story of all of the Devatas and Asuras. And that was given just to show us who this adhikari, who this student of the Upanishad is, what kind of qualities they should have. And it also brings out that Saguna Brahma, that nature of Ishvara, the one who can turn a blade of grass into a thunderbolt that can't even be blown away or moved. And so in chapter 4, it is this helpful tips for a seeker who's not able to really get it. Means there's some questions in the mind, some doubts in the mind. And so first the techniques of upasana are given, and then the student wonders and says, now, could you tell me the Upanishad? And this is where we are in verse number now 7. So 4.7. Upanishadam ho bruhiti ukta te Upanishad brahmhim bhava te Upanishadam abruvam iti. So here the question is Upanishadam bho bruhi iti. The student is saying, teacher, bruhi, tell me this Upanishad. Tell me the Upanishad. And the teacher said, well, I just did. Ukta te Upanishad. I told you this Upanishad. Brahmhim vava te Upanishadam abruvam iti. And I have imparted to you this Upanishad. Brahmi means this knowledge of Brahman. So now when we come to this question, we are in this place where we're wondering why the student is even asking this. Why is the student asking, teach me the Upanishad? And, there's a joke that this is probably why a lot of the ashramas were placed near the banks of the river, because after some time, either the teacher wanted to drown themselves or just push the students in the river and they didn't get it. So now, what is the nature of this question? So one is, either the student would want to know, is this finished, or is there something more? Is there something more about this Upanishad that you want to tell me, or that you can tell me? The second is, which is brought up in the commentary, is there something else required? You have taught me knowledge of Brahman, but do I need something else for liberation? Or does knowledge itself give liberation? And so the student is curious there. And the teacher says, in the commentary, Adi Shankaracharya says that knowledge itself is enough to give liberation. Nothing else is required. And whenever we have a doubt, we think of the story of the 10th man. And I'm sure everybody knows that story. But when the knowledge was given that you are the 10th man, that's it. I am the 10th man. That's it. And liberation is immediate. So knowledge directly provides liberation, and knowledge alone can give liberation. But it is true that that knowledge requires that prepared mind. It is true. So knowledge requires that prepared mind to be available. And so even with the example of the 10th man, we will see that when the 10th man was told, you are Brahman, you are the 10th man, you are the 10th man, the 10th man also had to just stop for a second and count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The 10th man had to stop and do that, right? So that prepared mind is essential for knowledge to take place. But that knowledge alone is key to liberation. Nothing else is required. It's not that we have to do anything. After the 10th man is given the instruction, you are the 10th man, the 10th man doesn't have to do anything. Doesn't have to do anything at all. You are the 10th man, enough. Now remain as that. And we always speak of abiding in the self and abiding in the self. And what that really means is not abiding in the not self. So having gained this knowledge now, when we say abide in the self, you are already the self. We are already the self, right? It's not that we sit on ourselves. We are already the self. So the self is our very nature. It's our very swarupa. And we saw this in Upadeshasara yesterday in our Upadeshasara class with the Devis. Your self is your nature. You can't get rid of it. You can't get rid of it. You cannot produce it. It's something that's always there. Even if we don't want to be Brahman, we are Brahman because that is our inherent nature. So when we say abide in the self, what we mean is remain as you are. And that's why they say just be. But then when we say just be, people ask, but what to do now? So then we have to give the adverses. Don't abide in the not self. Because that's unnatural. To think I am the body, I am the mind, I am the ego, that's unnatural. So don't do anything that's unnatural. Just remain as your own true self. That's it. Really, that much is there. That's enough. But this becomes very challenging and very hard. And people still feel that after getting this knowledge, they have to do something. They have to experience something. They have to go through something. And so this is itself an erroneous notion. Nothing more is required. This itself is an erroneous notion. So what helps us get rid of that erroneous notion? Why does that erroneous notion come up? That erroneous notion comes up because the mind is wild. It's wild. And so in the next verse, number 8, in the next mantra, the teacher is going to say, these are some very helpful things to keep the mind at check. Because otherwise, it will fall into these erroneous notions that, number 1, I am ignorant. I didn't get that knowledge. It was given to me by the teacher, but I didn't get it. This is one erroneous notion. Second erroneous notion, now that I have knowledge, I must still do something to be liberated. I must do something to be liberated. Doing something, taking up spiritual practices, because it's our nature or because it's something that we like to do is completely fine. But I need to do something to be liberated. Number 3 erroneous notion that can come up, I need to experience Brahman. I need to experience the self. We already saw Brahman is ever experienced in every single thought. So these erroneous notions come up even after knowledge has taken place. The student will still feel, I didn't get it. And this happens because the mind is wild. And so therefore, like that, for us also, to tame the mind, these helpful tips are there to tame the mind. And this is now verse number 8. Okay? Verse number 8 says, Tasyai tapo damaha karameti pratishta vedaha sarvangani satyam ayatanam. So, in whom will this knowledge of Brahman be completely rooted? In whom will this knowledge of Brahman stay and be established? That so much so that they won't have these erroneous notions that they're still ignorant, but they still have to do something to be liberated, and there's still something to be experienced here. In whom will these notions not come? So it is said here, tasye, for that Brahmavidya. Tasye means for that Brahmavidya, pratishta, to be established. What is required? Tapaha, dhammaha, karma, iti. So tapas, austerity, dhamma, control of senses, and karma, these are the feet, so to say, of that Brahmavidya. They're the feet of that Brahmavidya. So let's look at these words first, and then we will go on to the next one. Tapaha, we all know, means austerity, right? And this austerity in the commentary is described as the single pointedness of the mind and the senses. When there is ekagrata means single pointedness. They have one goal. The mind and senses have one goal. That is called tapas. So anything we do, any action we do in a very single pointed manner is tapas. It's an austerity. And this can be our work. This can be our japa, our puja, our study, our contemplation. All of these things are called austerity. And when we perform work in a very austere way, what happens is we preserve a lot of energy. So it's not that, we need more time and all of that. It's not like that. The more disciplined we become, the less time we need, the less time we require. What's required is not more time. What's required is more discipline. Because the more focused we are, the more things we can do, the more things we can be. So tapaha is really that practice of keeping everything in a single pointed fashion so that I preserve all of my energy. This gives us tejaha, gives us brilliance. And with this energy, it's extremely preserved. You will see in Ramayana and Mahabharata that they went to the forest. And when they went to the forest, what did they do? Austerity, tapas. This is what everybody does. They build that huge reserve of energy through this practice of austerity. And in that practice, so tapas is creating this energy. Dhammaha is, or the control of senses, is preventing that energy from leaking out. So now I have that energy by my carelessness or because of my vasanas, that energy can leak out when I do not have control over my sense organs. For example, I have so much energy and then I waste it on eating so much. What happens? It's all gone. My virya is gone. I become completely sluggish. If I have all that tapaha and I waste on staying up all night to do some nonsense thing, that virya is gone. I leaked it out in dhammaha. Dhammaha is that capacity to prevent energy from leaking out in an unintelligent and not moderate manner. So if unintelligently I let it leak out, or I let it leak out immoderately, then what happens is I waste some of that bala, that virya that I have. The key for a seeker is to live in self-control, in moderation, in intelligent engagement. Similarly, I might have all that tapas and austerity built up, but one thing that I see or one thing that I hear that's disruptive that could affect my entire tapas. So that's why that dhammaha is incredibly important. So one creates energy, one prevents it from leaking out, but then we bring karma here. What is that karma for? It's for directing that energy. because now I have so much energy built up. I've got to do something with it. And that something that we do is karma. Karma here means that karma yoga, or that spirit of yajna, wherein my every action is a service to the world, because I've gotten so much now. So let me release it, and release that energy, not just for my own selfish pursuit, but to serve the world at large, because I can and I have the capacity to do so now. And in that karma yoga, directing that energy in such a way that I'm aware that I'm focusing on serving God. I'm serving God. So there's no selfish agenda, and there's also no worry about the result. Whatever will come, and let it do so. And so these three practices form the feet of Brahma Vidya. When I am rooted in these three practices, that is one step of that knowledge being rooted in me. That's why even in the Bhagavad Gita, when we're studying now, the practice of karma yoga is incredibly important. Because if we don't have that sense of tyaga, we don't have that sense of renouncing the results of our actions, how will we renounce the ego? We're kidding ourselves. We are absolutely kidding ourselves. If we cannot practice the renunciation of the results of actions, and we still have worries and stress and all of that, renouncing the ego is going to take a lot of work. And so this is the feet of Brahma Vidya. Then we come to Vedaha Sarvangani. The limbs or the arms are the Vedas. The Vedas means all the limbs, the Shiksha, Kalpana, Vyakarana, Nirukta, the grammar, the etymology, the knowledge of the Veda, but primarily the knowledge of Vedanta, the knowledge of the scriptures, the knowledge of the truth. That's all the limbs. So let's say this Brahma Vidya was a person. The feet are that tapaha, dhammaha, karma, and the limbs are the knowledge of the Vedas, the knowledge of this truth. Because the Vedas, both of karma and Brahma, both of dharma and Brahma, both of how to live a dharmic life and how to realize the truth, both are important, because both will keep us in check and give us a lot of harmony, harmonious living. These are the hands. And the heart is Satya. Satyamayatana means the abode or the heart of Brahma Vidya is truth. Truth is defined in this mantra as that straightforwardness and unity in thought, word, and deed. So when my thought, word, and deed are all in line with each other, when what I think, what I say, and what I do are in one straight line, that's called Satya. That's called Satya. And only somebody who has this Satyata, that person alone actually is the fit student of Brahma Vidya. Because if I can't even be true to myself, how am I going to abide in that changeless truth? This truth, being true to oneself, it is really living with integrity. So yes, we may not be perfect people, and that's okay. Shastra doesn't want perfection. Shastra wants sincerity. Sincerity and honesty and truth with our own selves. So if there's still something that we doubt, something that we need to work on, something we're not sure of, that's completely okay. But Satya is realizing that and recognizing that and trying to, as much as possible, adjust ourselves so that we are in one line. Because if we cannot be true to ourselves, we cannot be true to that higher self. We cannot. It does not work. And further, in the Yoga Sutras, it says something so beautiful. The one who cultivates this value of satya or truthfulness, whatever they speak will happen. And so now, if we cultivate this satyata, this truthfulness, if we say aham brahmasmi, it will happen. It will happen. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And we see this in the lives of our realized masters. What they say happens. It happens because there's so much truth to their speech. When we live by a value so much that we don't shake by it, that value protects us. It protects us. It doesn't, it doesn't waver from us. There was one story I was reading of, this Gita Press. This is a true story. In one of the Kumbh Mela, is this gathering every couple of years in Haridwar of all saints and sages, all various people to take a dip in the Ganga. And there's a lot of stalls there, a lot of book stalls, satsang stalls, food stalls, all stalls are there. There was a stall of Gita Press. Gita Press is a publishing company that publishes all these wonderful books, Upanishads and everything they publish. And there was a fire. There was a fire in that area, and so that Gita Press, their book stall, got burnt. All the books got burnt. And so the person who was there filed a claim with the insurance. Insurance asked, what was the value of your stock? And he said 14,000 rupees. And so they got a check later for 14,000 rupees. And when they got this check, I think it was the owner of Gita Press, somebody there said to this person, well, did you sell any books before the fire came? And he said, yes, I sold some. How much did you sell? I sold 7,000 worth. Do you have that cash? Yes, I have that cash. This person was so mad and said, you better give back that 7,000. You give it back because that's not satya. We can't live like that. And these are the values that they live by. And that's why people really appreciate their books, their publications, because there's so much they live by these ideals. So that's integrity. When it's easy enough for us to do something wrong, or when it's easy enough for us to do something which nobody would really notice, when we still live by integrity, that's called satya. And that's the abode of this Brahma Vidya. So someone who practices these values, definitely that knowledge will take root or be established in them. So austerity, restraint, and dedicated work, these are the foundations of it. The saving knowledge of the Upanishads. The Vedas are its nymph, and the truth is its abode. And now we come to the last mantra of this Upanishad. Yova etam evam veda pahatya papmanam anante swarge loke jaye pratitishthati iti. What it says here, yaha, the person who, vai, indeed, etam here means Brahma Vidyam, this knowledge of Brahman, evam, the one who knows it in this way. In what way? Pratibodha viditam matam, that which is the illuminator behind every thought. Anyadeva tad viditat, that which is atho aviditat adhi, different from the known, different from the unknown. That is which shrotrasya shrotram manaso manuyat, the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, which means the very subject. The one who knows this truth as the very subject, apahatya papmanam, destroys sin. Papa destroys sin. What is the biggest sin? The biggest sin we commit is identifying ourselves with the limited, thinking that we are the ego. That is the biggest sin. There's no sin greater than that. The minute we think we are the ego, all the sins will come to us. That's why that's the biggest sin. And all the merits will also come to us. And that's what the merit is also sin. It's also dirt. So this is the biggest sin, identifying as the ego. Apahatya papmanam, destroys all, having destroyed all the sins. Anante swarge loke jeye pratitishtati. He or she is established in Anante Swarge Loke. Swarge Loke here doesn't mean heaven. Because it says Anante. Anante means infinite. In that infinite self. Swarga means that place where there's sukha, where there's bliss. So in that endless bliss, Jaya, in that endless bliss, the highest blissful state, or the highest blissful nature, I would say, they are established in. And they are established in that. That Swarga, that heaven that we know, is Anta. Anta, it has an end, right? These heavenly worlds we see in the Bhagavad Gita. It says, upon going there, after your merit is over, again you come back to this earthly realm or whichever other realm we have to go to. So that heavenly realm or loka is Anta. It has an end. But what's being said here is Anante. Anante means no end, which is indeed limitless, boundless. And Loka here means that realm of experience. So that who experiences themselves as this infinite abode of bliss, after having discarded their sins, pratitishtati, they're established in it, and they're established in it, iti. And these two pratitishtatis are to say that, yes, now the Upanishad is over. Iti chaturtaha khandha. And so this is the beautiful Kenopanishad. So now we will just read the first mantra, the Shanti mantra, Apyayantu Mamangani, as a, as a circle, because we never complete an Upanishad. We have to come back to it again and again and again. Om Apyayantu Mamangani Vak Pranashchakshushrotramatho Balamindriyani Sarvani Sarvam Brahmopanishadam Maham Brahma Nirakuryam Ma Brahma Nirakarot Anirakaranamastu Anirakaranam Me Astu Tadatmani Nirateya Upanishatsu Dharmaha Te Mai Santu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay. So now, what happens in the Upanishad? So today, I thought with the rest of the time, I would just share with you a very beautiful highlight in Kenopanishad, which is the proof of Ishvara. Next week, we will summarize the whole Kenopanishad. The week after that, we will have a Mananam session on it, and then we will conclude. But for the rest of the time today, there's a very unique feature, as I said, in Kenopanishad, in the Vakya Bhasha, one of the commentaries, and that is the proof of Ishvara. So now, granted that we know that the truth is Brahman, why again bring this concept of God? So today I'll just share this with you. And what I've done is, it's a long commentary, so I've just kind of taken highlights, like the most important details from this commentary, so that we can get some sort of understanding and also appreciation for this. Okay, so I've put it now in a presentation so that it becomes a little bit easier to follow along. Okay, so here is the theme now that we are going with And this is the connection. So first we will see the connection. The connection is, now we know that the sole purpose of life is the realization of truth. We understand that that's the sole purpose of life. From this Upanishad, it has said, whoever doesn't realize it goes to great destruction. But the one that realizes it realizes their immortal nature and never has to come back into this world again. So we established that all efforts must be put forth towards the realization of the self, which is that pure awareness, pure consciousness, Brahman. But for some people, this is hard. This is difficult. And so here it says, Nirvishesham param brahma sakshat kartum anishvaraha ye mandaste nukampyante savishesha nirupanehi. And what this means is, Nirvishesha Brahma, that Nirvishesha Param Brahma, that Brahman without attributes, Sakshat Kartum Anishwara, it's very difficult to recognize directly. And for such people, Anukampyante, out of compassion, Savishesha Nirupanehi, there is now a description of Brahman with attributes. For these people, for certain kinds of people who have a difficulty of grasping the self. And so that's why this whole commentary is put forth. And although the existence of God is stated in our scriptures, the mind cannot logically appreciate it. Or I should say the intellect. To be very specific, the intellect cannot logically appreciate it, even though it is established in scriptures. So here, a logical flow or thought flow is given. So the first part of the logical thought flow is, Gurudev always says, the world is a cosmos and not a chaos. So, tat siddhihi jagato niyata pravrittehe. It means that in the world, there are controlled and regulated activities. So, for example, we can see that if somebody plants an apple seed, they will get an apple tree, apple fruit. Someone plants an orange seed, they will get an orange tree, orange fruit. If a cow has a baby, it's going to be a calf. It won't be a dog. If a human has a baby, it would be a human also. Of course, there are some extreme cases that are also quite inexplicable, but for the most part, there are controlled and regulated activities. We can predict the weather to some extent. We can predict when the full moon will be, high tide, low tide. So there is a certain balance and a certain order. And whenever there is a certain order, there has to be somebody who's making that order happen. And we see that in a company, that when everything is so structured and people are doing whatever they have to do, the boss must be around. But if everyone's very lax and just chilled out, then it must mean the boss is not there, right? So this is also what we see in daily life. So the world is a cosmos, not a chaos. So there must be someone that's controlling and regulating these activities. So we say now there is a regulator, and here also we establish that not only is there a regulator, but there is a creator. There's a creator because we see that, so the proposition is God is existing because whatever is an effect has to have a cause. So like a pot has to have a pot maker, right? It's an effect, so it has to have a cause. Whatever we see in life, whenever there's an effect, there is a cause associated with it. It doesn't just come like that. And we also see that the creator is a sentient creator. Whenever we see something produced, somebody sang a song. Who sang it? Someone wrote a poem. Who wrote it? Someone built a computer. Who built it? These questions are always asked. We never really see an insentient being creating something like that. We can say that robots do create, but who created that robot also, right? And with what power do they function? So we always see that in this world, there's a sentient creator. We never see that a computer can produce another computer. We don't see that. So if it is created, there's a created object, there's a sentient creator. And that creator cannot be a jiva. So we might think that, okay, why can't it be a single jiva or a group of jivas? Well, one is that jiva is part of the creation, and jiva is alpagniyaha, alpashaktiman, which means jiva has very finite and limited knowledge and finite ability. So somebody that's finite in knowledge and ability cannot create the infinite world, right? Somebody who's finite, how can they create this big infinite world? That's impossible. So that creator cannot be jiva. And if we also think that maybe it is jiva, maybe we do have the power to create, but we also see that why is there sadness then? Right? We wouldn't want to create sadness, but why is sadness happening even if we don't want it? That means we don't have the power to create. There is a creator. When we say creator, it is consciousness functioning through the total mind. That's what we call God, consciousness functioning through the total mind. So then we see here, now that creator of the thing has to have a knowledge of the thing. So yo yasya karta sat tajnyaha. So the one who created a thing has knowledge of the thing. So the one who creates a computer has knowledge of the computer. We keep using pot because that's in the commentary, but really one who has created the computer has to have knowledge of the computer. So one who created the world has to have knowledge of the entire world. Sarvasya karta sarvagniha. So sarvasya karta, the creator of all, sarvagniha, knows all. So this is how we say that God knows everything, because God is the creator of everything. Now, again, I'm speaking from the vyavaharic or transactional standpoint, because we've come to this level of where the student is unable to grasp nirvishesha Brahma. Now, the creator of the thing also has to have the ability to create the thing. So, yo yasya karta sa shaktiman. So, for example, now the computer I'm using, the one who creates a computer also has to have the ability to create it. And knowledge is not enough. We have to put stuff together. We have to make it work, program it, so it works, right? So, Sarvasya Karta, the creator of all, Sarva Shaktiman, the creator of all has also to have the ability to create all. So, if a person has knowledge, if the person has knowledge and ability to create one computer, then the world, right? The creator of the world has to also have ability and knowledge of how to create that world. And that world is sarva, it's everything. So that creator knows all and is capable of all. What we say, sarvagnya and sarva shakti. Then some people might say, no, it's not God that creates the world. Again, God defined by consciousness functioning through the total mind. It is karma. It is really karma. And so we say karma cannot create the world because karma or action is insentient. The action of singing, of dancing, of speaking, it relies or it sits on a doer. So karma cannot create the world on its own. It's insentient. It does not have the ability to do it, right? So the Purva Paksha says, karma created the world, why bring God into the equation? If I put the seed in the ground, the tree counts. So why do you say I have to say that God did it? But here we say that karma is dependent. It by itself cannot give results. However, God uses karma in the equation to give results. But karmas are dependent. They cannot, an action cannot by itself produce a result. So therefore, then the question comes that, well, if you're saying that God gives the results of actions, then defects could arise, right? If God gave results independently based on God's will, defects could arise. And these are the defects. If God created based on his will, there would be what we call vaishamya, or defect of partiality in God, because then God will decide who gets what. And so we would think that God would be partial. Or there would be nairgrinya, the defect of cruelty. If someone has sorrow in their life, they will blame it on God and say, oh, God's responsible for that sorrow. But the thing is that God does not, I'll come back here first, God does not create based on his will. God creates based on the karma. So now, what have we established here? So first we've established point number one is that the ultimate truth is Brahman, pure awareness, consciousness, which is the self. Point number two, some people are not able to grasp that, to understand that, and therefore Ishvara is given as a support, as a tool. Who is this Ishvara or God? Point number three, consciousness expressing through the total mind. That's what we call God. And what is the responsibility of this God? The creator of the world, the regulator of the world, and the karma phaladata, the giver of all the results of action based on karma. Why do we say that there is a regulator? Because everything's well regulated. Because everything's well regulated, there must be a regulator in the world. Why do we say that God is the creator? There's a created, there must be a creator, and that creator must be sentient. And that creator must also know what their creation is and have the ability to create. And therefore that God, we say, is all-knowing and all-powerful. But why can't karma itself create the world? Karma itself cannot create because the karmas are insentient. They're insentient. They need to be in a karta. They reside in a karta or in a doer. An action, it cannot do its own thing. Why can't you say that the jivas create the world? The jivas are limited. We have limited knowledge and ability. We cannot create this world. And if we think we can create the world, then why are we creating sorrow? We don't want sorrow, but sorrow is happening. And further, if two jivas say, okay, we can create the results of our actions, what if two jivas want different things? What if two jivas are in a tennis match and both want to win? But what result will come? We don't know, right? So therefore, karma or the jiva cannot create the world. But then it seems like God could be partial or cruel if God just gives us the results of our actions based on God's will. It's not that. It's based on our karma that these results of actions come. So therefore, there is no such defect of partiality or defect of cruelty on God. And so if we ever wonder, is there a God? The answer is yes. The answer is yes. That because of which we can speak, that is only by the grace of God. And the fact is, people wouldn't debate and argue so much on something that's non-existent. right? That's something that's so non-existent. People wouldn't debate and talk and argue so much about it. That means it is there. It is there. In the relative standpoint, there is definitely the presence of God. There's definitely the grace of God, the functioning of God, the laws of God. And those seekers who are not able to make that plunge to that formless, nameless self, then must hold on to God. And even if the seekers can make the plunge into the nameless, formless self, still hold on to God, because it is only by God's grace in this world that anything moves, that anything happens. And so this very beautiful portion is given in Kenopanishad. I wanted to share that with you. Just food for thought if ever these thoughts about God come up. Okay. All right, wonderful. So I'll just say the closing prayer, and we'll see if anyone has any questions, and then we can sit quietly. We are, again, grateful to Bhagwan and Guru for giving us this opportunity to study this most beautiful Upanishad, Kenopanishad, and may we continue to study it, and of course, live it. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Okay.